Hello, welcome to my tutorial on the Luciana Bag by Shamballa Bags. I love this pattern. I've made this a few times now and I thoroughly enjoy it every time I make it. So I hope you enjoy this tutorial and you find it helpful to make your bag. And so without further ado, enjoy and happy stitching. Okay, so what do we need to start with? I have got my exterior fabrics, and that is 2 exterior panels and the contrast band that goes at the top on the inside. And I've also cut out some fabric for a slip pocket, and the measurement I've done is 12 inches long and 6 inches across, so it's going to be like that. Then we have our linings, and that's the bottom piece, the zip pocket piece and the lining panels. I have interfaced all my fabric already, and then the contrast fabrics. Got the zipper strip, the flat panel, the accent pieces, and you have to do 2 with the pattern up and 2 with the pattern down. The bottom piece, the piping strip if you're using the piping strip, and your straps. And then last but not least, the foam. The foam for the bottom cut 3/8 of an inch smaller all the way round. And then for the panels, it depends. I never fuse my foam ever. If you have success with it, great. But I have found way back in the early days that when I turned my bag, the foam caused wrinkling, and if you try to iron it out, it just gets worse. So I stopped fusing it a very long time ago. So I do the foam the same size as the panel, and then I base stitch it in, and then once I've sewn the seams, I trim the foam out of the seam allowance, so that the stitching is anchoring it down. So that's my preference. If you want to fuse it, good luck with that, and you make the foam 3/8 of an inch smaller. And then finally we've got our hardware and bits and bobs. I've got my piping cord, 3mm piping cord, lots of rivets. Now I've got some gate rings here. They're quite large. I like to have large ones. I mean, it's entirely up to you what size you get. But these have screws, so you unscrew it, sort of open it up, and then screw it back up. But you can also get spring rings, and that's rings, oh no, that's not a spring ring, that push down like so. Clip on, clip off. I was going to use these. They're slightly smaller, but I only have 2 of them, so I couldn't use them. But that's fine. And I've got my handmade label, 3 magnetic clasps, and my grommets. Now you can use the slightly different ones that, I don't like to use the word cheaper, but they're less expensive. And so you can use these, and they'll look fine. But I do like to use these ones because they're, well, they do look that much nicer, I think. So I've got 8 of these. And then my zip pull, wherever it's hiding. Now, a little trick to show you with the zip pull. I cut my zip. We need a 7-inch zip, and I cut it to 9 inches. Well, actually, I could cut it to 9.5 inches. And then I cut a diagonal, and then the other side, which is the left side, and this does matter, I have found, being right-handed. The left side, I've cut a diagonal 1/2 inch down, or 3/8 of an inch down from the right. The reason being is, you put, oh, and also, I used my little lighter to burn off any bits of wispiness and to stop it from fraying further. And then I put the zip pull on one side, on the right, and you move it down a little bit until it meets the left, and then just move that onto there nice and easily. And then, oh, and then she says it must have come off as I put it down, so it's because I've got this thinking plaster on my thumb, my finger, I mean. Right, she says. And then, I'm making this look very difficult, and it isn't. There you go. And we haven't got any, the zip's gone on evenly, the zip pull's gone on evenly. It's not one big, like, hole where this is sort of uneven. It's gone on evenly. So that's how you do it. So let me show you again, but properly. Just open it up a little bit. Put the right side on first, and slide it down till it meets the left. Push it down onto the left side, like so. Lay it down, and then use your fingers to grab the 2 pointed sides apart, and there you go. See, that looks that was a bit better that time. And it's that easy. And then you just trim it to even it up, and then you've got your zip ready for use. So that's my method for putting your zip onto, or the zip pull onto the zipper. So we're going to get started with the tutorial. I'm going to sort myself out, get myself ready, and we'll begin shortly. The first thing we're going to prepare are the accent pieces for the corner of the bag. And we need to draw, cut out, sorry, 2 of each side. So mirror image. So you do your pattern that way, then turn it face down. And we need to cut out, draw out the margin. So the best thing to do is to cut the dotted, along the dotted or dashed line, to cut the margin out. And then that leaves us the ability to follow the line for the margin, like so. Which we do for all 4 pieces. And we'll do the mirror image in a little bit. And then there's a couple of ways of doing it. You can get the double-sided tape and you can lay the tape along the outer edge like so, and then peel the backing off. And then I never have them ready. I'm always having to dig around for them, so I do get cross with myself when I don't have them ready. I did get them out. Oops. Okay, so we pulled the backing off, and then we cut or snip near to the line, not all the way. It may stick a little bit because obviously you've peeled the backing off the tape, but it shouldn't cause too much of a problem. So you get the gist of what I'm doing there. And then we need to fold over at the line, like so. And keep going. And so on. That's that way of doing it. The other way to do it is to get some tape and put it fairly near, but not too near, to the fold. So these two ways, it's entirely up to you which way you do it. And then we still have to snip. Like so. Peel the tape backing off. And then fold over like so. So it's entirely up to you which way round you do it, whichever you find more comfortable. I've used slightly wider tape doing it this way to ensure that I've got the full stretch. So entirely up to you. I'm going to continue and do all 4 pieces. I'm sure you don't want to be sat bored watching me. So I'm going to do that before we go further. Okay, so I've prepared all 4 panels. And we've got the excess hanging out here, which don't cut just yet. The first thing we need to do is get one of each side. And then we just need to place a bit of double-sided tape along the back here. And then line it up on the corners like so, and press down. And do the same. I'm using a double-sided tape that's sewable. So if you're going to line double-sided tape up along this edge, because you're going to be stitching, either lay it in a bit further if it's not a sewable tape, so that you're not going to stitch along it, but this is sewable. And in case you're wondering about the fabric I'm using, I love it. It's called Beauty in Bloom by Chelsea Design Works for Studio, pattern number 4824. Now I bought this from Tanya Fabric Facebook group on pre-order, that I ordered back, I think, in January. Unfortunately, she has none left because I wanted to order more. And I've tried to track some down and I can't. So good luck with that if you manage to find some. It might be that you can find it abroad in America or wherever. But I can't track any down in the UK, unfortunately. And I only bought a metre. Wish I'd bought more. That's the trouble. You can never be sure when you're buying fabric online of what it's going to look like in person. And it arrives and it's like, wow. So there you go. It's a chance you take. Right. Back to the topic. I'm going to now top stitch along the edge. As close as the edge as I dare, really. To have a really nice, neat edge. So I shall do all 4 corners. Okay, so I've stitched all 4 panels in place, and now first thing to do is cut off these little bits that are poking out. And then turn over and just cut off this part of the fabric. It's just to remove bulk on the back and in the seams. Like so. Okay. Now, what we need to do now is to transfer the markings for the rivets. They are decorative, so you don't have to do them, but they do make a difference. And I think they're a beautiful addition. Just found a long thread there. So line the pattern up, and you've got your rivet markings. Like so. And then face down. And obviously you don't need to watch me do the other panel as well. You get the gist. Now, I'm varying from the pattern a little bit here because the pattern goes on to tell you to add the rivets. But by doing that at this stage, the rivets could be a bit loose feeling. And what I like to do personally is to add the foam to the panels, so that then the rivets anchor the foam in place and stop it from moving about. So that's what I am doing. It's entirely up to you whether you continue with following the pattern tutorial. Now, I've cut my foam to the size of the pattern piece, the panel, rather than 3/8 of an inch smaller, because I don't fuse my foam. No matter what I do not fuse it. I've had issues in the past with it causing wrinkling that doesn't iron out. It's been awful, so I just never ever fuse foam. As it happens, I'm using flex foam and it's non-fusible, so I couldn't do that anyway. If I wanted to, I could attach or fuse Wonder Under or Heat and Bond Light to the foam and then fuse it to the panel as well. So if you want to do that, you could. I don't. And what I do is I just base stitch it in place at the sides, and then with long stitches like 5-6 mil. And then once I've sewn the panels together, I trim the foam out of the seam allowance, and because I've basted it in, the base stitches come out easily, and I trim the foam out of the seam allowance, but the foam is fixed in place with the stitching. So that's what I do, entirely up to you what you do. I'm going to go ahead and baste the foam in place with both panels, and puncture the holes for the rivets, and then we'll proceed with adding the rivets. So I've basted the foam in place quite close to the edge, about 1/8 of an inch, and then I've gone round punching the holes. I use my twist punch, which I got from Amazon for £6 or £7. This is actually from the Tandy store on Amazon. And I've put the sort of middle-sized punch die on, and you just put it down, twist, and that's your hole formed. Now I get my rivet press, and if you don't have one, oh, do get one. They're fantastic. I was rubbish at putting rivets on before this, and if you don't have one, then obviously you have to do it by hand. A trimming shop, not Tandy, sorry. I got it from the trimming shop, which is where I also got my rivet press from. And I just go around adding all the rivets. And then, as you can see, it's fixed the foam in place as well. So I'm going to continue doing that, adding the rivets to both panels before we proceed on with making the flap. Okay, I've had to come back a couple of steps, and I do apologise. I'm not adding a magnetic snap to my bag, I'm adding a twist lock. And because of that, I completely forgot to show you to install the magnetic snap before you sew the flap pieces together. So imagine we've not sewn it together and we've got the one piece of flap piece. You mark the dot for the magnetic snap, and if you're adding your handmade label, you can add it here as well. And that's the guide for doing that. So you do the dot, then you get your washer and draw. If I've got a washer here, yeah. And so imagine you've drawn the dots, and then you get the washer, put the washer over the dot that you've drawn in the centre there. Do your lines, cut through, add the snap, then proceed with putting the flap together as I showed you, and the handmade label if you're adding one here, and then do the following steps that I'm going to show you next. So I do apologise for that, but at least I've remembered at the final few moments. Now we'll get on with the rest of the tutorial. Okay, so here's the panels, both made with the rivets. It's very pretty, isn't it? I think so. Okay, now we're going to do the flap. Now my vinyl is very thin. It's got no padding on the back like some vinyls do. I mean, I wouldn't even say it was 1 millimetre thick. It's that thin. And putting these together, it's just really floppy, and there's no strength or body to it. So I've cut some headliner. It's only 2mm thick. And I've cut it, what I did was I drew the pattern around the pattern piece, and then I removed 1/4 of an inch all the way round. So it fits in there nicely, and it sandwiches between the two, and when I stitch the flap together, it will hide the headliner. You don't want to go to the edge, obviously. So what I want to do is put some double-sided tape, because I want to stick it to the vinyl so it doesn't move about when I'm sewing it. And I'm using my craft one that's wide and stronger, because I'm not going to be stitching anywhere near this. I know it's excessive, but hey ho, I just want to make sure that it sticks, and it's going to stay stuck once put together. So I'll remove all the backing, if it allows me to. And then, just to help me place this properly, I'm just going to draw a line 1/4 of an inch from this edge, and then 1/4 of an inch here, just to start me off. I don't need to go all the way around or anything. And then lining it up. That's in place. I mean, I could use glue, because this vinyl doesn't burn with glue. It's really behaves nicely. Whereas 90% of vinyls do burn when you put glue, as in you do the line of glue and it will just show through to the other side of the vinyl. It reacts really badly, and this vinyl doesn't mind glue, but it takes a while for it to dry, and I'm not the most patient person in the world, as anyone that knows me would tell you. Right. Okay, peel the backing off. And I'm going to do the same on this piece, and I will carefully watch how I'm laying it, because it's going to stand a bit proud of the vinyl piece, so it could be hard to judge exactly where to get this right, whereas bit off there. That's it. And just move it a little bit here and there till I get it in the right place. That's it. That's it. Happy with that. And now I'm going to stitch all the way around. Okay, so there's my flap. I've stitched all the way round, and now, as you can see, you can see the underside of the vinyl showing through. So I'm going to paint the edge, and I use this. It says Angel Us or Angelus or oops, that way around. Flat black acrylic leather paint. I got this from Amazon. If you go on Amazon or wherever you shop and look for acrylic leather paint, you'll find it. And I tend to use this clear one. It's white, goes on white but dries clear. It's lovely, and I've always used this. I've only recently converted to using a couple of colours, and it's black and navy. They're my two most common colours that I make, but the rest I use a Sharpie pen to colour along in the colour I'm using, and then pat that on top. But I thought I'd treat myself and get the right colour, and all we do is go along the edge like so, and it's very forgiving. If you get any, I've got a tiny amount, oh, that way, along there, and get a bit of tissue, and I'm using a glove as well because it can stain your fingers badly. So I just get some tissue and wipe the excess off, and it doesn't stain. So it's lovely to use. So I'm going to continue and do it all the way around, leave it to dry, and then I shall return with the next step. Right, this is dried now, and as you can see it's nice and dark, so that's got rid of that. Now I get the pattern piece, and I've actually carefully measured dots all the way around at the same distance that the accent pieces are. The reason for doing that is that so it just all looks uniform. Ignore this corner, I accidentally chopped it off when I was cutting the fabric. So I lay this over the flap, and I'm just checking that it's all oh, and by the way, if you find that you need to trim your flap around the edges, do. I had on the top here, on the reverse, it was slightly over, so I just had to snip along the top, and partly down the bottom it was also doing the same. So I just neatened it up, but otherwise it was all okay. So do trim it if you have to, as long as you don't go cutting loads off, you'll be fine. And so I'm going to mark the circles, and I'm going to add rivets all the way around. I did it on another bag I did in this pattern, and it looks really nice. So that's why I'm adding it. So you don't have to add any. By all means don't if you don't want to. And I'm actually, I should have said, I do apologise. I'm actually not adding a magnetic snap, I'm adding a twist lock. So, and I should have said to you at the start, before we put the flap together, to add your magnetic snap. Okay, so to continue with the tutorial, I'm going to punch the holes for the rivets. I shall come back when I've done the rest of them, otherwise it's a bit like watching paint dry for you. Okay, so I punched the holes and I went ahead and added the rivets because, well, you all know what it's like to add rivets. And I'm going to get the pattern piece and I'm going to mark for my lock now. And again, apologies if I've confused the heck out of you. By not adding the magnetic snap. So I've marked for the lock using the magnetic snap placement, and then using the washer I mark for the main hole and the screw holes like so. And I actually get my large punch pliers, punch pliers for the biggest hole. I find this easier to do to start with, and I punch the hole out like so. And then I get my craft knife to continue cutting out the rest neatly. And I've not got my fingers underneath like you think. I am very careful. And I just, using the craft knife, cut the hole. you just cut out, use what you can to cut out what you need to cut out. Like so. Okay, I'm hoping that will be enough. Don't want to get rid of the screws. Right, and then it's just trial and error of fitting the lock. And that is a good fit, as you can see. And then we get the back plate. Oops, a daisy. Oh, goodness me. Right, I've got a slightly larger screwdriver. Somewhere. There. Slightly larger, a lot larger. That fits the threads better, or the head of the screws better. Okay, so that is the female part of the lock fitted. Now I'm going to get the back panel piece. I'm turning it upside down for ease. And we need to mark 2 inches down from this top edge here. Like that, and I just want to measure each part. So mine's measuring 8.5 inches from the bottom edge. Yeah, the line's even. I want to make sure it wasn't off at an angle or anything. Turn the flap over onto the back and just add a row of double-sided tape. And the one thing I forgot to do was mark for the centre. So and using the dot I've got in the centre of this flat piece. Oop, wrong way. lay it along the line. Just check that it's central. Now that looks a little bit, oh no, that's going to be fine actually, yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch along there. I'm going to actually add 2 rows of stitching, and then I'm going to add rivets also. Okay, so I've sewn the flap on and I've done 2 rows of stitching in the same place on the same line just to reinforce it. I've gone ahead and punched the holes that I'd marked earlier, and now I just want to pop my rivets on. And these rivets are 9mm posts with 9mm heads. And as you can see, I've reinforced the foam add-on here, so the foam's not going to flop down inside the bag at any time. And then when you can find the place for the rivet to sit in, just realise that my punch is coming out. And then final one. Now, what I have noticed is where the rivet punch had slightly come down and I hadn't realised, it sent this rivet crooked. So I need to take it off. So simple way is I get my pliers, I go to the back. Now I always put my rivets the same way so I know that the post part goes from the top and the cap underneath. That way I always know which way it is. And going through the back for the cap, you put the pliers underneath and pull on them. Pull on the cap. And it takes a bit of doing, but it will come. And you just keep working on it, coaxing it off like so. And there it comes off. And you pull off the top. And can you see where it went in wonky? And that's because this piece had started twisting down. I obviously hadn't put it in properly from when I last used it to do something else, and I had a different dye in there. So, oops. So we put another rivet on. So all's not lost. If you have a problem with the rivet, just do as I showed you. And if you always do your rivets the same way, you'll know which side to take off, because it won't work with the post side. There we go. And that's the flap added. And doesn't it look nice with the metal, with the rivets and the twist lock in place? So I'm happy with that. And the other thing I want to do, because I didn't want to add my handmade label here, I felt it'd be too much to have the handmade label up here. I want to add it here. And I have to make sure it's going to be low enough so that the flap, when it comes over to the front panel, won't get hidden The label won't get hidden and covered up, which would look a bit silly. So I shall make sure that if I get the pattern piece for the main panel, oh, it doesn't show you where to add the twist lock, but okay, well, when we come to add the lock, I'll show you, but that's when I'm going to add the handmade label part as well, so we'll do that shortly. Now we're at the part of the pattern where it tells you to add your foam, but we've already done that. If you chose not to do it when I did it, please add your foam pieces now. And I want to now mark for the male part of the lock, and the instructions for the magnetic snapper to mark it 4.5 inches down from the top. So the same applies for the twist lock. And so I've marked for that, and just to show you, obviously with sewing you're going to have the seams bent down, etc. So once the seam's gone, sort of imagining that that's bent over. Now I want the lock to fit really well, so I'm going to wait and mark for my lock, for my male part of the lock, once the bag's almost finished, or the exterior's made. Then I can judge it properly, because bending this over now, it wants to be there instead of there. So I've marked where the pattern says to mark, 4.5 inches from the top, but I'm going to leave it until, as I say, the exterior is made. Then I can judge whether it's a suitable place or whether it needs to be higher. So it's entirely up to you. But now I've marked for this, I know roughly where I want my handmade label to go. And I like to get a piece of the vinyl, and I need my rotary cutter. I'm just going to cut 7/8 of an inch. So this is 7/8 of an inch, and then just to trim that edge off so I know it's straight. And now I want to do 1 7/8 of an inch long. So it's 7/8 of an inch high and 1 7/8 of an inch wide. And getting my label, if I lay it that way, you can see it's a nice size. So I always do that size for my labels, and they're usually pretty uniform size. And I then just get a little bit of double-sided tape and put it along the middle. Take the backing off, and I want to measure for where I want this to be. quite like it to be 2 inches down. In fact, I'm going to put, yeah, 2 inches down is a nice amount. So it's 4 inches up from the edge, the bottom edge. And I'm going to mark for the centre. And just want to mark the middle of this which is very slightly under the one. And then double checking that it's straight. Yeah, that's nice and straight. Now I'm going to stitch all the way around the edge of the piece. So I've stitched this in place all the way round, and now I get the washer and the label wherever I put it. There, and I'll just check to see where the prongs go through, and they're going to go through the last but one posts. So I need to mark the centre of this, which is there. And then I get the washer and draw the lines. And I get my craft knife and I haven't got my fingers near it, so I'm not going to go through onto my fingers. Like so. And then push it through to the back. I'm just going to cut the hole a little bit higher, because I wasn't quite happy with the placement there. Just checking the placement again. Fold the backs over, get my rubber mallet, flatten them down, and then I just get a piece of the Deco Real Light that I have spare left over, and you can either iron it. In fact, that's what I'm going to do because it's a lot quicker. And I can fuse it by ironing it to the foam. Obviously, if you use foam that's fusible, then you won't probably want to do this, in which case glue it. And just fuse it to the foam, and it will protect you from feeling the prongs through the lining. There we go, like so. And I just got rid of the marks that I'd made there. I've left that one there though for the lock. And whilst I'm at it, I remember that there's that line there that I just want to get rid of as well, which has done. So there we have it. That's the outer panels ready to continue. Now we're going to prepare the piping and the bottom part of the bag. And what I've done to start with is I've drawn a line along the centre, which was 6/8 of an inch, or sorry, 5/8 of an inch either side. And I've then laid double-sided tape all the way along that line, which I shall remove. And then I get my piping cord, which is 3mm piping cord, and I lay it along double-sided tape. And the reason I do this is it just keeps it in place and helps it to behave while we're doing the next stage. I've tried doing it without and I've got into a bit of a hot mess, so I do like to do this. But obviously you don't have to if you don't want to. And now I'm going to lay some double-sided tape along the centre of one side. So it's not all the way to the edge. Not sure if this tape's going to last. I may run out. But I think it's going to do it. Okay. Okay. So we peel the backing off. And then we fold it over, getting my roller ready. And we really fold it over and tuck it in tightly against the piping. And this is why I stick the piping down first. Otherwise the piping tends to get caught up on the double-sided tape at this point, and it gets quite messy. Okay, and then I get my roller . And that's the piping sorted out. And now we start with attaching it to the base and using more double-sided tape close to the edge. And you don't have to use this. I do it all for ease. You could even staple it if you wanted to, as long as they don't get in the way of the machine needle, which I fear they may, but you could always risk it. But don't, whatever you do, put your needle through the staple. But if you think you can put the staple close enough to the edge without hitting it, then that's great. But I don't think I can, so. Okay, so let's remove the tape, or the backing, shall I say, and then start laying the piping. Oops, I beg your pardon. We need to get this piece next, that we've already cut out, and it's in the tutorial as well, the measurements, but lay the short edge along the edge and start your piping inside it. Now, as I come to the bend, I'm going to help the piping to go round the corner, or the curve, by just snipping in, and that way you can just fan the piping open like so. I'll lift it up and show it to you in a second. And if I lift it up, hopefully, get the light on it, you can see just where they fanned out a bit. It definitely helps just to snip those curved places. And the last curve, and then you'll meet where you started, and then join them and get a little more tape should have taken the other side because it's a bit longer. So put tape on that edge, not on the little tab. Like so. Fold it over. And there you've hidden the join. And although you've got these parts here, it's not the actual join, so it will be fine. So I'm actually going to take this to the machine and just base stitch around the edge to keep that in place. Okay, so I've attached the piping. I used my Teflon piping foot to do that. I also edged the piping, which I forgot to show you, but I just carefully dabbed it with some of the edge paint, so it was less visible that way. And as you can see, I've just roughly stitched 1/4 of an inch around. And we just pop that aside for a moment. We get our 2 panels again and place them faced together, and we're going to stitch up both sides at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and pay particular care to match up the side parts, the vinyl join. Okay, so I've stitched down the sides, and I'm just going to check that the side panels are equal. So that's what you're looking for, that they match up on both sides. Very important. If they don't, I'm afraid you need to unpick it. So you may want to base stitch to begin with so that it's easy to unpick. If you find it's okay, then stitch as normal over the base stitching. Okay, so what I've done now is I've marked halfway on both sides, excuse me, and then I've got the bottom panel. You may notice I haven't added my foam yet. I add it after. I just find it easier to add it without the foam, and then I have the foam trimmed down to size, so it's easy to add in. And I will be using bag feet, and because I'll have feet, the feet will actually sort of stick the foam to the base as such. It will hold it in place, so no need to stitch it in anyway. So I've marked the halfway points on the base, and what I do is I place them together and I staple them. And this is a particular staple gun. It's different to the usual one because I can get close to the edge and get quite accurate. I have to make sure I'm not going to hit the staples with the needle. By using the stapler, and I'm stapling the other side to it, it's much easier to sew. You'll see now also that it's much easier to remove the staple, just like that. So without getting both sides of the fabric, we'll start again. And then also the opposite side. And I always make sure that this part, the flat part of the staple, is on the vinyl side, because this is the part that I use this on to remove it. If it sinks into the foam, it's harder to get out and it can rip the foam. So I always do it on the smooth part of the vinyl. And then we match up the lines on this side with the seam of the bag, and I make sure that the seam's open like so. And the same on this side. And then all I do now is just go round placing the staple every sort of inch or two, inch and a half. And using the staple is great for doing curves. Gives fantastic results, perfect results on curves. So I highly recommend. And so on. So you get the gist. I'm going to go all the way around. Then once I've gone all the way around, I'm going to stitch close to the piping. You can generally feel, because I've not added the foam yet, I can feel the edge of the piping. And using my zipper foot, I can get very close to the piping. So that's another bonus of not adding the foam. Okay, so I've stitched all the way round and I've turned it right side out because I need to check that we've stitched close to the piping, that we've got no areas where, unfortunately, I say that, I haven't got any areas that show it, but you're looking for places where the piping is away from the bag, it's not stitched close to it. But I have managed it on this bag. I don't always. Sometimes I'll turn it and I'll need to return and just stitch closer. But as it happens, I'm happy with this. The other thing I should have mentioned is to check that this part that covers the join is on the back of the bag. And I will put a note up on the screen so you'll have seen it by now. But I did forget to mention it, so I'm sorry. So that's the bag on its way. Do like it. And whilst it's this way out, I want to mark for the feet. I'm going to use some large feet rather than the screw-in ones, and they slot in nicely underneath. So I'm going to add 6 feet because it's quite a large base, and the reason why I didn't mark before I stitched it in was because you can ever so slightly stitch unevenly. You might have the base slightly to one side a little bit or anything. You just don't know. So I leave it till after and then I mark. And I'm using removable pen, heat removable pen, although this does wash off as well. So I can mess about with measuring and doing what I like. So I'm not too worried about that. And I always start with adding feet an inch away from the edge. And I'm measuring the length. Now I've got 13 inches here. So I start 1.5 inches in from this edge. And that's what I'm marking at the moment. I'm not marking the inch from that edge. So 1.5 inches. 1.5 and then between them I measure the halfway point. So that's the measurement that way for the feet. And now I mark an inch in. It's always handy to have a little glass of water on standby to just erase the marks you've already made. Okay, and I'm just going to check now that they are still evenly spaced. Yeah. And then I find it a little easier to mark across on this side because I use the dots I've just done. Right, so once I've marked, I then have a look at it to make sure it looks even. It's just starting to fade, so I want to... That's it. So I'm happy with the placement. And now what I'm going to do is add some double-sided tape to the base of the bag. And there's something else I use when I want a nice firmer base, and that's this canvas sheeting, canvas mesh. I buy it from Amazon, and I think the packs are 10 or 12. It's 10.5 by 13.5 inches. It's called plastic canvas mesh, and it is what you see. And I then measure the base by using the foam, and I get a permanent marker because it's easier to see. And You probably can't see it yourself on the screen. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I follow the line I've just drawn, and if it's slightly uneven, you can trim it up to even it up afterwards. And I never chuck this away because you get different size bags, and they're always handy to keep for different bases. So I can trim this bit off. And this bit at the bottom. And that will stop it piercing holes in the bag it's in. Right, so that's the rough shape, and what I want to do is make sure that the mesh isn't poking out beyond the foam, because I don't want the foam, I don't want the mesh rubbing away on the bag material, vinyl or cotton. And I just want to trim all these little sticky out pieces. Sticky out is good English, isn't it? Just so that I can give a smoother edge as possible. I'm happy with that. And what I like to do is to glue it to the foam. I mean, the feet will hold it down, but I just like to make sure that it's quite happily stuck down. And I don't know if I've mentioned this thing I'm using before. It's a tube squeezer, I suppose you could say. Toothpaste tube squeezer. I use it on toothpaste, but I also use it on my glue and moisturising creams and anything else I've got that I need to squeeze the life out of. Like so. And I got this from Amazon. You get a pack of 3. So okay. So the beads of glue will come through the canvas, which is fine. I just press it down. When I see the beads coming through the holes, I know it's going to stick nicely. And I will leave this to dry now before we go ahead and add the feet. So I shall return when it's dry to continue with making the base. Right, this is nice and dry now, so turn it over. And also, before I did anything else, I went back into the bag, turned it wrong side out and removed all the staples, because you don't want to leave them in the bag. And I'm just going to trim that, any excess that you see poking out. And then I've taken the double-sided tape off, and I'm going to lay this into the bag. I'm not using glue because I don't want the glue to burn through onto the vinyl and ruin it. So I wanted to make sure that it would be okay. Okay, so just want to make sure that it's not protruding anywhere, that it's yep, I'm happy with that. And now I get my very sharp craft knife, and making sure I don't have my fingers in the way, I want to put a cut through, and I know I haven't got my fingers anywhere near where the blade's going in. So just make sure that your fingers are okay. So I think I've gone through enough. We'll find out as we add the bag feet. So we push that through. Hopefully. Yeah, that's gone through. And I'm going to keep pushing the feet in, and then I shall come back and show you what to do once I've added all the feet. Okay, I've pushed all the feet through, and not all the feet come with washers. Some do, some don't. So I bought these washers from eBay. They're 10mm across with a 5mm opening, and they just pop on to the feet nicely. I find they have all sorts of uses, and I think I buy them in bags of 100. So once I've pushed them onto the feet, I then spread the feet apart, pulling on the prongs as I do. So there you go. So I shall do the rest and then again come back to you. So I now have all the feet installed, and that's what it looks like. So we now put this aside and start on the lining. Right, onto the lining. We need one lining panel piece and a contrast band, and we put them right sides together like so, and we stitch across the top. Okay, so I've stitched it at 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across, and then I ironed the seam pointing down like so, turned it over and pressed it again, and now I'm going to top stitch along the top of the black lining. Prepare the other lining in exactly the same way, and then we come to doing the zip pocket, and the instructions of which are on the Shamballa website, so do take a look. They're under the tutorials, but if other than that, I can show you now what to do. So I get my zipper strip, And we need to draw a line, and you can just go straight across at 1/2 inch in from the edge. I beg your pardon, I'm trying to think of what it's called then. And again on the other side, so you've got 2 lines, and then 1/2 inch in from that edge, this way actually, and 1/2 inch in from that edge. And we now have to cut the middle box out. So you can do it with your ruler if you'd like to, but I'm very well practiced at using a rotary cutter. I'm trying to think how many years I've been using one. I think it's got to be at least 12, maybe 15 years. So I'm okay at cutting straight lines. But if you're not confident and you've not been using one for long, then by all means use your ruler. I never go right to the very top, although I think I have here, and cut across. And so we've cut that box out, and we're left with our zipper pocket piece. And for a minute there I thought I hadn't prepared the zip, and I was going to say, oh, I'm going to have to go and prepare it and come back, but I had prepared it. So what we need to do now is, using my sewable double-sided tape, I put along on the outside edge, we may be interrupted by a phone call shortly. I'm waiting for a phone call, so I apologise ahead if I have to get disturbed by the phone ringing. Right, pull the double-sided tape off. And I'm turning this upside down so it's easier to see. And we need to place this 3/8 of an inch down from the top band. However, I'm going to make it a little bit lower. Like so. And I'm going to do it 1/2 inch below the bottom of the seam. And I'm just measuring this. So it's 4 1/4 each side. So you just measure the centre. You may be better off measuring the centre of your zipper piece and the centre of your lining piece, and then lining up the two. I was taking the shortcut, which is quite naughty, I know, but they are equal, so I'm happy with that. But you do it how you want to do it. So I'm going to stitch around the outside edges now. Okay, so I've stitched all the way around the outside, and now we just need to cut away the lining that's inside the stitching. And now we need to put some tape on the inner edges of the box. And I'm just going to peel off the top one for now. And I get my zip and making sure that I'm placing it centrally to the zip. Okay, and then peel the bottom one and place that down. Okay, and then we're going to turn that over. And I'm sorry, I should have said, when I stitched this box, I started with long threads and I finished with long threads, both the bobbin and top thread. And then I pulled them through to the other side, tied them off, so that you get a nice clean start and stop. Okay, so now we need to place some double-sided tape along the bottom line of stitching on the inside. And place the zipper pocket face down with the bottom edge like so. And then take it to the machine and just stitch along the bottom line here. Don't go any further. I've started and finished with long threads, so I just turn that over, and if I pull on this thread, the loop will appear for me to be able to pull the thread through from that side, which saves using a needle. If you can't do it for one reason or another, then you can, by all means, just get a needle and sew it, you know, pass it through with a needle, and then tie the ends off. I always do 3 stitches, don't know why, 3 knots. But I do. Go, and then we bring that pocket down, just finger press, get the double-sided tape and place a line of tape along the, just under the top row of stitching. Then bring it up and lay the pocket along there, and then we take it to the machine and we stitch up the side, along the top and down the side. Okay, and then as before, we've got 2 long threads that we need to pull through. Check that it's okay, and I haven't pulled stitches out. Oh, that's all good. And then tie this off. And then what we need to do next is to stitch down each side at 1/4 inch seam allowance. And that will be the pocket created. So we're just going to stitch down there, and that's the zip pocket done. Okay, so there's the pocket finished and done. And then I'm going to do with the other lining just a small slip pocket. And with that, I've cut fabric that is 8 inches wide and 12 inches long. And then I fold it in half, right sides together. And then at 1/4 inch seam allowance, stitch down, along, leave a few inches gap, stitch again and up. And then I shall turn it the right side out. Before I turn it right side out, I just need to do a couple of things. And one is cut the top corners like so, and the bottom corners also. And then last thing before I turn, I just like to iron the seam to ease the closing of the seam after. So I just iron this part. And it just makes it a lot easier when we come to stitch it closed. And I turn my iron off and then realise I had to turn it back on because I'm going to have to iron again. So we push through, turn it right side out, and I always push as far as I can into the corners with my fingers. I also always double stitch on the corners, both ways, vertically and horizontally, just to reinforce the corners, because it can so easily happen that you push through by accident, whereas reinforcing them stops that happening, or reduces the risk anyway. So I just use, you can use anything, crochet hook, knitting needle. I'm using my Clover tracer pen, whatever, or even the correct tools that you can buy to push the corners out. And then as you can see, this seam is already folded in and pressed, but I'm just going to press it further. And then I get a little bit of double-sided tape. Just to hold the opening closed while it's stitched in a moment. It's entirely up to you how big you want your pocket. If you want your pocket to reach all the way across, by all means do. I vary from bag to bag because I like my bags to be a little bit different each time. So we've got our slip pocket ready stitched, and I'm just looking to see which side I prefer the most. I think this side, this is actually the right way up. It's hard to tell, but this is the right way up. And 16.5 across, and the pocket is 7. So that's 4 3/4 each side. 1/2 inch down from the top, like the zip. In fact, I'm going to do, I want to do the same height as the zip opening, which actually is 1 1/4 inches. So 1 1/4 inches down from the top, and my reckoning is 4 3/4 each side. So that's 4 3/4, and that's 4 3/4, yeah. So I get my pins and pin the pocket in place. So that I can stitch it, and I'm going to stitch down, across and up. And what I want to make sure of is I don't go quite to the top with the stitching, because I'm going to place rivets in the top corners, and if I do the stitching to the top, I'll cut it with the rivet holes. So I want to stop just below there so that the rivet will fit above. Okay, so I've stitched around, double stitched at the top here, and then I've punctured my holes for my rivets. And then using my wonderful green machine, okay, now I've gone ahead beforehand and marked the centre point of the lining, and I've put some double-sided tape on the end of my label, and I fold it in half and place it on the line I've made. And now I just need to stitch each side of it, and that's both panels completed. Okay, so that's the label stitched on. Now I'm going to turn them over face down so I can see more clearly when I mark. On the pattern you'll have the circle here for marking for the magnetic snap. I've punctured a hole in there with my rivet press, my rivet twist punch. I couldn't think of the name of it. Right, lay the pattern over the top. In fact, I'll take this one out so you can see more clearly. I don't confuse the matter. Right, lay it so it's over the top, and just mark the dots. Like so. Do it on both pattern pieces because we need to mark for the rivets on both sides. And then I'm going to get my one of my washers and place it over the dot so that the dot's in the centre of the circle of the washer, and mark for your lines. And what I like to do is get my June Taylor fray block ready, and this is to stop the fabric fraying after we've cut the lines for the snaps to go into. So just carefully go through . Right, so I've cut the holes, and now I just need to put the fray block over the cuts. And this is very watery, so it tends to go everywhere, but it's okay because it doesn't dry crispy and it doesn't stain usually. So that's that done. And then I get my remaining washers and my okay, so it doesn't really matter whether you have female, male on each side, so whichever you want to do, but whatever way you do it, do the females on one side and the males on the other, to avoid the possibility of placing them so that you've got two males facing each other and two females facing each other, which can so easily be done. So I do that. And then okay. Right, so they're pressed, and then I just get some headliner that I've cut off previously. That's spare, and I get my glue . You can use heat and bond light if you want to, or anything like that, anything that's fusible to fuse these, just so that you don't feel them and they don't rub against the opposite side of the bag. So I place them to one side and then do the same by pushing the male parts through. And again, glue. And put that face down. And now we just have to wait for them to dry. You could probably speed it up a little bit by placing the iron on it, but I'm going to let it dry naturally and have a little break. Okay, so these have dried and I've put the panels right sides together, and I just want to make sure that these joins are lined up equally so that they meet in the same place. As with the exterior, when we wanted to make sure that the accent panels matched up on the seam, we do the same with this because it just looks nice when you open it if it's all flows through. Okay, so we need to stitch down here, and what we start doing is start at 1/4 inch seam allowance and then gradually move out to 1/2 inch. You want to, by the time you get here, to have gone to 1/2 inch. Go all the way down, and then as you get near, go back to 1/4 inch. And do the same on the other side, only we need to leave a gap. So as soon as you come onto here, back stitch, leave a really good gap, start again and back stitch, so that you've got a fairly good gap, as big a gap as you dare leave for turning. So I shall go to sort them out and come back when I've done them. Okay, so I've stitched all the way down. As you can see, I've started at 1/4 inch, moved out, then moved back in, and then on this side I stopped there and carried on there. So next we need to do, I'm just going to check as well that the panels match up, which they do on that side and they do on that side. Now the next part is to do the bottom panel as we did before, and we need to mark the halfway point on both sides. Oh, that's the wrong one there. I must make sure I know it's that one. I misread it because I can't see properly. My glasses. And then halfway on the bottom panel. And this time, because it's woven, I can use pins to put these in place. And just do the 4 points as we did before. And then once we've done the 4 points, you get the idea, go around pinning it and then stitch all the way round. And I'm going to stitch a ½ an inch all the way round to give it a nice fit down the bottom. Right, so I've sewn the base all the way round, and leaving the bag lining with the wrong side out, we slip the exterior that's right side out inside, and with the zip pocket at the back and the flap that's attached at the back, put the lining inside. Sorry, put the exterior inside the lining. And then what we need to do is to match up the seams on the sides. On both sides first. And then go round and just make sure that the shape of the bag matches up. And then I'm going to pin all the way round and then stitch at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way round. Okay, so I've stitched around the top at 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I've then snipped notches all the way back. I beg your pardon. Then I'd cut the foam out. I trimmed the foam out of the seam allowance. Then I've cut notches all the way round, which will help give you a smooth finish. You can just cut lines if you want to, but cutting notches means that when it folds over, they'll fold over to each other rather than overlapping. But it's entirely up to you. So once you've trimmed the foam out and cut the notches out, it's time to turn your bags. So I'm going to do that. Well, I'm going to get my husband to do that. And then I shall return. Right, now I've turned the bag right side out, and just push these 4 through. And one last thing to do before we stitch the bag closed, and that is to add the male part of the lock. So I just need to get the washer. And I did have the washer out, and I think I put it away thinking it wasn't meant to be out. So I have a gazillion washers, as you can see, so I've got my pick. So I'm just going to see which ones they go through. So we need to just mark for the centre. Now I'm not too worried about, I've got the line here that I've made. Now I'm just going to pop the lining in for now, so that I can bring the flap over and see where I need to put the lock. And as it happens, it quite happily sits where I'd marked earlier, with room to spare. So imagine your bag's full. It was a perfect fit for there. So going by the line that I marked earlier on, and so with the white pen because it's over the dark. Right, I'm not sure that's according to that is central, but I'm looking at this. It's worth spending time just to make sure that you are lining it up centrally. So if that's just under 2 inches, yeah, that should be the centre point. So swapping and changing colours. And if I put this over there, yeah. Okay, so once you've found the centre point that you're happy with, mark the lines. I've got so many colours on here that I have to keep chopping and changing until I find the colour that I can mark with. And again, just measure. It's worth checking over and over. So that's 6 3/8 of an inch. And yeah, I'm happy now. Once you know you're happy, that's when you can cut through. So I pulled the lining back up because the last thing I want to do is go through the lining. That would be disastrous. And then I put my hand through the lining hole. I mean, you can do this before you've turned, but I like to make sure the flap's going to fit in the right place. And making sure my fingers are there and there. So nowhere near, and my hand is there. So I certainly won't be going through into my hand. Okay. Oh, do take the tray block. Pop it through. and get the washer. And pop the washer on. I'm just pushing it down, and then I'm going to hammer. Easier said than done. And there we have it. She'll just iron those creases out in a moment, but push that inside again, double check, and there's the lock installed. So I'm happy with that. And now I'm going to close the side of the bag, and I did forget to iron it. I normally iron the seam so we don't have to do it at this stage, but it's no big deal to do it now. I just find that by pressing the seam first ensures a nice, neat, crisp edge. Okay, and then I just put some double-sided tape in the gap to hold the gap closed as I'm stitching it. But you could use pins to keep it in place. You just don't want it slipping. Go. That's that, and then I'm going to stitch very close to the edge to stitch that closed. So I've stitched the seam closed, and then we push the lining inside the bag. So I don't know if you can see it because it's quite dark in there. Bring my lamp over if it will reach. So there we go. And now we need to top stitch, which will be fun because it's lots of up and down. But if you have a look on my YouTube channel, I have a video where I show how to top stitch with good results. So take a look at that. I'll try to remember to put the link in the description of this video so that you can find it easily. So I do top stitch that, and then return. We're showing you how to add the grommets. Okay, so I've top stitched all the way round, and here she's on the inside. So I'm happy with the top stitching. Now we need to add our grommets. We've got this pattern piece here that you can use to, you have to turn it over for this side actually, you can use to line up to add 2 grommets. And you've got different size grommets. You've got the nice chunky pretty ones, which are a bit expensive, but they look lovely. And you've got these ones that you like press together, a bit like a Rivets pressed, and this is a screw-in one. So you've got those, but if you don't want to add grommets, you can add edge connectors like these, and they literally just slip on the top. I've got screws on that one. Slip on the top like that, and you screw them in at the back, and away you go. They're nice and easy, and just use swivel clasps like this on the end of your straps to attach them. Now, I thought about using them because I've had these for a couple of years and I never seem to remember to use them. But I have concerns that you've only got those two little screws holding them on, and yes, you could glue them on. But I just think this is a big bag and filled with lots of items. It will be a bit heavy, and I just worry that over time these won't stay on. I don't know. So I don't want to really risk it. But I'm not going to do the 2 grommets with the gate rings. What I've decided is I'm going to add the larger grommets. I'm going to do 1 on each top, and I'm going to add the swivel clasps onto the straps so that these clip on. I just fancy doing something a bit different. So I won't need to use these, the guide. I'm going to have to sort of roughly work out where I'm going to put mine. So I'm going to do some measuring and marking and lining up, and then I'll have to punch the holes as well. But I've got a punch for that. Just looking in the... I've got various punch dies, and I've got this nice large one that fits for this hole, like so. So I get the size of the grommets that I buy, I tend to get for. And this one is 3/4 of an inch, and in centimetres, and you go by the diameter of the hole, and in centimetres, that's just a smidgen under 2 centimetres. So that's it. I'm going to go and measure now, and we'll go from there. Okay, I just wanted to show you, I removed the back of the grommet and placed it where I felt, well, I was happy for it to be. And initially I wanted it to be all even around there, spaced all evenly. But then I was a bit concerned that I wouldn't be able to get the clasp on comfortably, which is a problem I've had before. So I decided to put it up near the edge, like so. And then I drew a circle and I drew the dots for the screws. I took it off and I'm happy with the placement, and I did the same on this side. But when I initially did it, the first placement was there, and then I realised I needed to get a bit closer to match where the other one was. And I'm literally doing this by eye. You can't really measure to be exact. And I must admit, it's times like this I do get nervous, because I've made this beautiful bag and I've used expensive products and I'm going to cut into them, and it's not something I ever find easy to do. But it needs doing. And I just line up the press with the hole that I've drawn, I just like to shift around because I'm looking to see inside. Okay, here goes then. I often have to stand up to do it, so oh gosh, takes a bit of strength. And then on this side as well. Gosh, oh, it's hard to do, but it's doable. Okay, so it hasn't quite gone through. It has gone through. I just need to help it by trimming that last little bit. Like so. And again on this one. Okay. And I like to get my June Taylor fray block, which I shall use in a moment. I now have to punch the holes for the screws, and to do that I use my biggest punch. Now you could either use your twist punch or the punch pliers, I suppose they're called. I'm just going to see what this is like using this. So yeah, that was okay using them actually, because the risk you run with the twist screw punch is that you're twisting it, and you could twist away, and so I'd prefer not to use them for this. Okay, so now I'll use the fray block. If you haven't got a punch die or the green machine, I'll show you something else that you can do. I'll get a scrap piece of paper, and basically what you can do, a scrap piece of fabric rather, is draw the circle, and then you can get your craft knife. In fact, I'm going to do it on the edge here because I want to save these scraps of fabric. I always save scraps to save little tiny patchwork pieces. It's nice to do that. So we've drawn the circle that we need to do, and then I get my craft knife and I cut through all the layers as a crisscross, doing a cross, literally. You may not go through all the layers the first time, so then you just have to keep doing it. And once you've sort of done so much, you can literally just, you can either cut away like so, or get your grommet. It's probably not going to work for this because I haven't cut large enough, so in fact let's cut the whole. Oh no, I can't do it because I can't do it now. Just, you cut through and cut the cross like so, and then put it over and sometimes you can do it this way, but it's not going to work because I haven't got the layers. So then you just literally cut, and if you have to do a layer at a time, then do a layer at a time rather than trying to do all of the layers in the foam. So I've cut the circle out, and then we can place it over the grommet like so, and we punch the holes as we did on here. So you get the gist of what I'm trying to show you. Now we place the grommet down here, and I make sure, I'm going to turn that over, and I want to hold that back out of the way. So just hold that back out of the way so you can see what you're doing, and lay the grommet over, and then you can see the holes for the screws. So you tuck it round, tuck the raw edges in. You may have to sort of just gently snip a little bit, and so on. And then we get the back piece, the back plate, like so. And you just have to feel for getting it in the right place. Oh, goodness me. Just want to tuck that down. And then get the other screw. Okay, so that's the one grommet installed, as you can see. I'm happy with that. I'm going to install the rest, and when I come back and show you, we'll also do the strap. So that's the grommets added, and I'm happy that their placement's even. So now we put the bag aside and it's time to make the strap or straps. And we get the two pieces that I have added a little bit of length, a couple of inches, but you choose which length you want your straps to be. And I'm going to add some Peltex to them because this is very thin vinyl and they need a bit of support. They'll be too thin and they just won't feel good. So if they were extendable handles, then I wouldn't, because the Peltex wouldn't go through the slider. But as these aren't extendable, they're just basic straps, it's okay to add the Peltex. But I don't do the Peltex to full length. So I draw a line along the centre of the strap. And I get my Peltex, which is 71F. It's one-sided fusible. And I'm just looking at the length of my strap. I can't remember what length I've made this now. Right, 22 inches. I'm not sure if that's the pattern length or not now. I can't remember. But I've made it 22 inches anyway. Now, allowing for folding the straps, I allow each end to be 3 inches without Peltex, which will sort of become quite apparent. So I only want to make my Peltex 16 inches long, and as well as the length, the strap's going to be 1 inch wide, so the Peltex needs to be a little less than 1 inch, otherwise your strap will end up being wider, because you've got to allow for a little bit of give. So this Peltex doesn't look like it's completely straight, so I'm going to straighten this up. And now I do it 7/8 of an inch wide. And obviously we need 2 of them. Right, so we want this to be 16 inches long. So what we do now is I get some of the wide craft double-sided tape. That's the one that doesn't sew, and three inches in, I lay it about a quarter of an inch in from the centre. And I need to stop 3 inches from the other end. And then we start by laying the Peltex, and we don't lay to the centre, we lay just away from it. This will allow for folding it. And then we now want to go the full length. Just run out, that much left. I have to get another roll out for the next one. Okay, so we now fold over, again not quite to the edge. We want to stay away from that centre line to allow for folding. If you go to the line, it's going to push the vinyl and you'll end up with an uneven, wavy edge that won't look great. So and again, not quite to the edge. So as you can see, there's a gap along the centre to allow for folding. It's very important that you have that. Even if you weren't using Peltex, you still need to leave a tiny gap for the vinyl. And otherwise you'll end up with, as you see here, I'm folding edge to the edge. If you don't have that gap, you'll end up with one sticking out further than the other, and then you get an uneven looking strap. But if you leave that gap, you'll have a nice equal sided strap. Like so. I don't know if you can see that or not. So it's time to sew it now, all the way up, along and down again. Okay, so I've done the strap, and as you can see, these edges are nice and together. Now if I'm going to add edge straps to mine, end strap, show you end straps there. I'm going to add these to the end of my straps because I love them. But if you don't have them, or you don't want to add them, before you do anything, fold your end over by 1/4 of an inch so that you don't have a raw edge like that. I'm going to do the other strap and then we shall do the rest of the strap. Okay, so now to sort the strap out. And what I've done is I've marked a line 4 inches in from the end. So you've got an inch of Peltex there. And then I turn over to the other side. Now, because I'm putting these strap ends on, I'm marking the first dot for the rivet at 3/4 of an inch up from the edge. It's like the pen isn't working. And then the next one 1/2 an inch up from that. And then I get my twist punch. And I go through. And if you're not going to put a strap end or an end strap on, just do it 1/2 an inch from the edge rather than 3/4 of an inch. Then I fold over to the line and I mark through the holes I've done for where I've got to puncture holes. I never do 2 rows together because it's so often, it only takes it for the underneath part, the underneath strap, this side, to be slightly off centre. And when you turn over, the dots are over here somewhere, the holes. So always do 1 layer at a time. So now I get my clasp and I slide it on. And then I have some water by me because this pen isn't just heat dissolvable, it's water dissolvable too. And I don't need that anymore because I have done the holes. So the holes will show me where to fold the strap to. And we fold over. If you don't want to use rivets, you can stitch the strap closed, but I don't like doing that, to be honest with you. I much prefer doing this. I just think it's neater and it looks prettier. So, oh, I'm all butterfingers today. Goodness gracious me. Okay, and get my green machine. Okay, so that's the rivets in place. And I get my end strap, and you don't want to do it like that because then you can see the screws. You need to do it so that the screws are on the other side, and then bend the strap back. And I always use an awl or a bradawl, called different things by different people, just to put holes in to help the screws with going into the vinyl. So rather than pushing the vinyl down, it will go into the vinyl, so you get a better hold. I never go in fully because as you're twisting, so you can turn this end out, so I don't tighten fully. Okay, so that's one end done. I'm going to do the other end and then I'll come back and put it on the bag and show you it. So here's the strap ready, and I've got this other strap on the bag already, and you got to make sure you've got the really big clasps as well. These are the really large ones, because if you get the wrong size clasp, I have to show you, like this, that would not fit on here, so it won't even go on. So really make sure that you've got a very large clasp if you're doing it this way. So you clip it on and then you just have to maneuver it. Like so. And there's the bag done. Beautiful pattern. I love it every time I make this bag. So I hope you've enjoyed the tutorial. I hope you make a bag, and if you're in my group, please do post it and show me. Whatever group you may post it in, I would appreciate it if you tell them or give them the link to this tutorial so that they can find it and use it as well. So happy stitching, and I'll see you again soon.